Wellness Wednesday with Dr. Bradley Meyer of the Okoboji Wellness Clinic. Good morning, Dr. Meyer.
Good morning, Dave.
Today's a big day. We're going to kind of go down the rabbit hole just a little bit here, as folks might say. We're going to talk about anecdotal evidence versus double-blind, triple-blind studies from the FDA or other medical agencies in the government. And I've done a little research previous to today. One of the things that I think a lot of people know, but when it just comes to supplemental vitamins, those are not FDA approved. The FDA regulates them as a category of food under the 1994 Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, but it has no authority to review or approve them for safety or effectiveness. But there has been plenty of anecdotal evidence that supplements are very beneficial for a whole lot of folks.
Absolutely, and it is an interesting rabbit hole, and we'll take it a little bit further. But the supplements in particular, many times we talk about, whether or not you're using supplements or you're using hyperbaric therapy or ozone therapy, or you're using a traditional prescription pharmaceutical medication. A lot of it still has to do, too, with there's a broad spectrum of dosing. And so like anything, too much of a pharmaceutical is not good. Too little has little effect. Same thing goes with the broad range of supplements and whatever that approach that you're using from the toolkit to try to get that individual back into balance, get the body back into that state of where it wants to go is to fix itself. It's literally a process, and this is, again, the art of medicine that unfortunately we've become so protocol-driven that we've, many cases, lost the art and that reasoning ability, and that is coming back now, especially over the last 5 years as folks have started to ask more questions. Social media has come about, and there's all kinds of information online that is available to us now, that it's a very healthy spot to be able to say, okay, some of these things that I just assumed were good for me or the right approach for me, maybe I need to have a second look at them. And does that mean that it's not right to have protocols at times? No, absolutely. But guess what? We had a COVID protocol 5 years ago. We had a bunch of different COVID protocols, and were all of those protocols the best protocol out there? And so that's the thing. And when you apply well beyond the COVID part, you can apply to any condition that somebody may be coming in to see us here at the Okoboji Wellness Clinic for. So that, let's say they have a history of rheumatoid arthritis or some autoimmune condition. There are traditional protocols for that, some things where you're using what's called DMARDs or biologics to suppress your immune system so your immune system's not attacking your body. That is one set of protocols. But God made lots of options and beautiful ways to help our body get back onto the healing path. That's the thing. Sometimes one thing might work really, really well for somebody, and the next person, hey, that might not work quite so well for them, so we have to adjust. And that's where it's just so much more beneficial to have options well beyond just, okay, here is the one thing that we standard use every time if somebody comes in with some kind of autoimmune conditions, for instance.
So all the way back into COVID, this memo shared throughout government health agencies, and Senator Rand Paul has gotten a hold of this memo, I'm guessing in preparation for the testimony of Dr. Anthony Fauci later this month. They talk about, and this was shared with DARPA and the Department of Defense, many of the early treatment protocols ignored by the authorities work because they inhibit viral replication. And they talk about three specifically all the way back to April 2020. Two of those, ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, and then another one identified in May of 2020, interferon. So it was known as early as April of 2020 that there were medications that could help with SARS-CoV.
That's a big mic drop. And the truth of the matter is it was part of the journey here and my journey, personal journey as a physician, and the development and the birth of Okoboji Wellness Clinic is that in particular, because when I was an Air Force doctor, I prescribed hydroxychloroquine frequently for the troops, and I did it in doses that would be considered maybe a moderate dose. And this was for malaria prophylaxis, so they when they deployed, they wouldn't get malaria. And I was quite comfortable with it because I knew that I was prescribing it for these young troops, these healthy folks, and they were having no problems with it. And so fast forward, that was 2011, 2010, fast forward to 2020, and I noted that the folks in Europe specifically, I think, were some of the first ones to start utilizing hydroxychloroquine as part of a treatment to help with the viral replication. And so I started that, but that was not part of the official protocol, and there were no randomized double-blinded studies on that medication. What came down as far as recommendations to the care for folks that came in with COVID to the hospitals and such, that was not in it. But I was like saying, I wanted to try it because I knew it was eminently safe with my prior experiences prescribing it. And so I knew folks were desperate at that time. And we did, and it was within 24 to 40 hours, like a light switch, that their symptoms with COVID would go away. And it was astounding. I'd never seen anything like that in my entire years of practice, where somebody had really bad flu symptoms, was really, really sick, and the symptoms just stopped so quickly. And the same thing applied eventually, 3 to 6 months later, ivermectin came on the scene, and I saw that it was being used in other parts of the country or specifically other parts of the world, including India, with some great success. And it was very intriguing to me, and I knew that it was, typically as an anti-parasite medication, but I was certainly going to try it because I knew it was a safe medication and potential big upside, and it was pretty incredible. But again, no randomized double-blinded study on it. And so that was not going to stop me from reaching into that toolbox to find another tool that I thought could help. Because I think so oftentimes we, as medical providers, are in many cases conditioned to believe that the only path forward before we initiate a potential treatment plan for somebody is that it has to have the randomized double-blinded study behind it. And unfortunately, if you're waiting for that, you're missing an opportunity which ultimately your duty to go and do all you can do with the best you know at that time to help your patient that's sitting in front of you. Is it worth waiting for that randomized double-blinded study that may never come? And in the case of why some of that stuff may never come, it was, ivermectin was already a generic medication. And so I would have been waiting for probably ever for that to happen. And so same thing applies when it comes to things that we utilize on a regular basis here at the Okoboji Wellness Clinic beyond ivermectin, and that's hyperbaric therapy, ozone therapy. You can't patent oxygen. You can't patent ozone because it's naturally occurring. And so because of that, there's no company that's willing to invest a large amount of money into a randomized double-blinded study to prove that these things work. But that there are still ways to go about deciding whether or not you want to bring these different tools into a care plan. And there's plenty of evidence out there on many of these, what's called quote unquote alternative therapies, hyperbaric ozone and beyond. There's just a case study of in anecdotal evidence, seeing what works for this patient and following them through. And that's an approach that was done for many, many, many years by physicians before we even knew what a randomized double-blinded study was.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, go ahead.
Well, I just want to bring up, for example, like Lene's car accident case. So she gets T-boned and she's got a concussion. She's got headaches and having some difficulty. And she came over to see you for some hyperbaric therapy. And now, again, this is probably not going to be common for most folks. But she goes in, has one hyperbaric therapy treatment, and her sore neck, her concussion, her headache, gone. Now, that's anecdotal evidence. That's not a double-blind study, but the fact of the matter is it was so extraordinarily helpful. How can you argue with the fact that there were great results? And like you say, it might not work for some people, but for her, it was gigantic.
Absolutely, and I think everybody deserves a trial of it, and to know that there are, again, all of these as we talked last week, hues in the color palette of the artist, that there are always lots of options to choose from to help get the individual back into a state of balance and where they're feeling better, less inflamed, into this state where they are having that quality of life. And in Lene's case, that's actually for an acute concussion, not all that abnormal. I mean, we have seen folks with just, an acute concussion between 1 to 10 hyperbaric treatments can absolutely have dramatic effect on folks, many of their symptoms that can be associated consequence of that concussion. So, and unfortunately, in the cases of concussions, many times because there's no randomized double-blinded study for hyperbaric therapy, then it's either the physician isn't aware of it, it wasn't part of their education, and then it's also not a part of their treatment plan. Instead, a lot of folks that have a concussion are just told to rest, and that's the treatment. When in fact, there's a process in the brain called coup and counter coup. That brain gets rocked back and forth in the skull, and it's like jelly going back and forth, and that causes a shearing force on that tissue and can cause significant trauma. And a lot of times there's a subacute inflammation that just hangs on for a long time. That acute inflammation stays in this subacute chronic inflammation state, and then you get another one maybe 2 to 3 years down the line, and the first one was never appropriately given, or that individual wasn't aware. Maybe I need to go get some hyperbaric therapy to calm down that quote-unquote inflammatory situation, or almost like a fire in there, that then can have long-term consequences way down the road. If you get your quote-unquote bell rung a couple of times, you're talking 30, 40, 50, 70 years down the road, can be another factor that could lead to some early signs of memory deficits and dementia. And so I would much rather address some of these things up front. We know how debilitating for families and patients alike dementia is. If we can do as much as we can on the front end of that to adequately treat, then I feel much better about that. And many times part of those treatments and those plans are things that are not part of the randomized double-blinded study. And then the thing is, thinking even with hyperbarics, I think that there's like maybe only 13 to 15 quote-unquote FDA-approved conditions that you can get into a hyperbaric chamber for. And yet there's this whole other list of 200 different conditions that you can see the benefits from an off-label perspective. And so folks, it's a big deal. And so that's why it's so important to have these discussions and for folks to be aware. Options. And so as more comes to light with watchdog groups and whistleblowers and things like that, then more is revealed.
Yeah.
And then more physicians are hearing about these other ways and other approaches. They get curious. Patients get curious about it. They ask their physicians, and then what was once, that's a little bit alternative, becomes more mainstream. Like right now, even with ivermectin, Dave, think about, a lot of people are pretty aware that there's a multitude of different uses for ivermectin. There's well over 10 different mechanisms of action of how ivermectin works. There's William Makis, who's an MD oncologist that he's in Florida now, but it's been using a lot of that for different approaches with CFCs and underlying tumors and such. And so these things, 5-6 years ago, what seemed like a pretty crazy stuff, ivermectin, now I would say it's becoming more and more mainstream to utilize that as an option.
And we're way out of time here, but I want to delve into it. Maybe we can do it in the next week or two. But I want to go back to Josh Wacker's story, because Josh was somebody from a very young age, suffered with mental illness, depression, anxiety. I think if I remember right, at one time he had been through 42 different psychiatric medicines, was getting nowhere, if not worse, and came to see you, started working with the different tools in the tool belt. We've talked about gut health and how that affects one's mental health. It just goes on and on and on. And to have somebody on this huge basket of prescription drugs and the interactions that can happen between different prescription drugs, that's not necessarily doing anybody any favors either.
And a shout out to Dr. Stephen Meek. He's in Sioux Falls. He's a MD. He's a psychiatrist, integrative psychiatrist, and another example of somebody that's walked into this space where he's utilizing beyond pharmaceuticals to support this path. So when we work as a collaborative team, some pretty incredible things where you're talking about a slow wean off of some of these medications. In some cases may take well over a year under the right guidance, but something that we think, is that possible when we talk about gut health and how that can impact neurotransmitters, and getting into a space where, that might make that more and more possible when that gut is adequately addressed. And so it's a beautiful process. It takes some time. A lot of times when we do get working with folks that are, really inflamed and out of balance and come in with their top 3 list, what have you, the cool thing is that a lot of times with a few small adjustments within 2 to 3 months, many times folks are starting to feel some change in a positive way. They get some hope. Then they see the team around them, and then a group of patients that come here from near and far that are become like a little supportive network, and it's a really, really fun process to get rolling with.
All right, we've got to get going. I knew this would be a long one today. We have got to get people to come over and check you out or have a discovery call with you. It's not just a Band-Aid approach at Okoboji Wellness Clinic. Their theme, thrive, not just survive. Just don't make it through a day. They want to get you to a point where you're thriving throughout the day. So, Dr. Meyer, how do folks maybe make that begin to happen?
Well, they give us a call at 712-339-6024. We're right across from Ace Hardware in Spirit Lake off Highway 71, 3305 Berquist Avenue. 15-minute discovery call, complimentary with Mychal Sheridan, Ollie, Avery, or myself, and we can talk a little bit about potential next steps when you make that phone call, or you can call right away for that initial hour-long visit. We were in, a couple days ago. It was pretty dramatic statement by one of our guests and patients, and he said that we were about an hour into the visit, and he's like, I've never had a doctor sit with me this long and ask me all these questions. So he was pretty excited about that, and that's where, I put out there the direct primary care membership is a pretty cool way to get going, because for the individual, $99 a month, but folks that want to start on that journey, maybe they're on a bunch of medications, prescriptions, and they want to start that journey over the coming months and years, and they want to try an environment that's very appealing, and it feels like your own living room in some ways here, a little family-friendly action. That is a great way to get rolling, because like I said a few minutes ago, it doesn't take a lot of, it could be some just minor adjustments just to get you going and feeling better on a better path. And then you get to set the tempo of, like, do you want to go fast, or do you want to go slow? Do you want to add some different treatments, or do you want to really focus on lifestyle? And that's more mobility and nutrition, and start there. And it's a very important foundational basics. That's possible. But, its ultimate goal is to provide that hope, and to provide options, and to have a conversation, instead of just, all right, this is what's good for you. You must do this. Let's have a conversation about where you see your health and wellness care going, and what are your goals, because we want to be here. Ultimately, you're in charge of your own health and in healing your own self, but we're certainly here to give you the support.
Very good. Dr. Meyer, got to run. Have a great day. Enjoy the beauty of the day, and we'll chat again soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Dr. Bradley Meyer at the Okoboji Wellness Clinic. Find out more at okobojiwellnessclinic.com.